Welcome to the Mind Body Couple podcast.
I'm Tanner Murtaugh.
And I'm Anne Hampson.
This podcast is dedicated to helping you unlearn chronic pain and symptoms.
If you need support with your healing, you can book in for a consultation with one of our therapists at painpsychotherapy.ca.
Or purchase our online course at embodycommunity.com to access in-depth education, somatic practices, recovery tools, and an interactive community focused on healing. Links in the description of each episode. Hi, everyone.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast.
Welcome back.
Yeah, we are into another work week, but I know on our last podcast, we were talking about preparing for our daughter's birthday, which we had. So we wanted to update that. Actually, it went quite smoothly, which is shocking.
It did go smooth. She almost lit her hair on fire trying to blow her candles.
For that part, yeah.
Had a quick dad move where I was like blocking the hair from the flaming candles. That would have been
Tanner protected her.
Would have been a bad end to the birthday party.
Yeah.
But it went okay. The one thing we didn't think about is the day her birthday was the day of the time change in Alberta.
Yeah.
So we actually lost an hour of sleep going into that day.
I felt tired.
Yeah.
Waking up was hard that day. Actually, I still feel waking up is hard. Like, I'm still kind of feeling it.
Takes a little bit. Takes a little bit of time. But today, this is really a common question.
Yeah.
Probably the most common question we get. And we wanted to do a topic on it. So it's actually going to be a 2-part series.
Yeah.
As our producer Alex loves the series.
Yeah.
He's like, do another 2-part.
Here's our 2-part series, Alex.
There you go. So, part 1. How do I know my pain or symptoms are neuroplastic?
I feel like that's a question sometimes we can kind of get confirmation on, but we can grapple with that throughout their healing journey.
Yeah, I think it's so common. Like, it's rare I work with someone that's fully bought in that their symptoms are neuroplastic right off the bat. Like, usually people go back and forth.
Yes.
And it makes sense. And we're going to dive into this. You know, there's a lot to cover, so we're going to break this into 2 parts, 2 episodes. And to begin, before we dive in, just a definition of neuroplastic pain or symptoms, in case you're new to this work. So, neuroplastic pain or symptoms means there's no structural damage or disease in the body. And the pain or symptoms are occurring due to our brain and nervous system being stuck in a state of danger or dysregulation.
Now, some people, Tanner, might recognize or identify something structural going on, but also identify a neuroplastic component. Can you speak to that a bit?
Yeah, which is another common question we get, that it can be a mix.
Okay. And so what we're going to talk about in terms of like this evidence or criteria, can that apply maybe to the person that believes there is a mix?
Yeah, like I think we can still look for evidence that some of our pain or symptoms are neuroplastic. I do want to state clearly, we know that most chronic pain and symptoms are neuroplastic. So you can self-assess if your symptoms are neuroplastic using criteria. We go through these criteria with our clients, first session, every time. And we're going to explore some of these criteria for neuroplastic pain and symptoms. And as we do this, really consider your experience with each of them. Like, take time, recall experiences from the past, but also more recently, to see if your symptoms fit with the criteria. I don't want people to take my word for it in the sense of like, oh, your symptoms are neuroplastic. No, look for the evidence. Look for the evidence, go through the criteria, see where you relate. And you can keep adding to your assessment over periods of days or weeks as you may remember or see more evidence occurring.
Yeah, and that's a really helpful tool. And we talk with people about that a lot. I think it's important in terms of like gathering evidence, which is what this is, to think of this as a tool in your toolbox to use, maybe when you're in doubt, maybe if there's a pain flare, if there's confusion, to kind of go back to this evidence that you see.
Yes. And an important piece I want to hit on is we're going to go through a lot of criteria over the next 2 episodes.
Yeah.
You do not need to meet all of them.
Yes.
This is not an all or nothing thing. Many people only meet 3 or 4 of their criteria. That's all they relate to. And their symptoms are still neuroplastic.
Yeah. And I like that you highlighted that, Tanner, because I think sometimes we can get confused of like, oh, I meet some, but not all. Does that mean some of it's neuroplastic, some of it's not? And we can kind of go into the weeds there.
Mm-hmm. And in our approach, when we're assessing neuroplastic pain and symptoms at our clinic, we find it helpful to break the criteria into 2 main categories. So category 1, it's not making physical sense. So we want to look for ways that pain or symptoms aren't acting like physical symptoms should, or how does it look confusing or fishy to you?
Mm-hmm.
And this is what we're going to cover in episode 1. We're going to go through this first category. Now, category 2 is sensitization factors. So these are experiences that suggest our nervous system has been in survival mode. When our nervous system is commonly dysregulated due to mental health concerns, traumatic experiences, chronic stress, or beliefs about our body, our danger system becomes sensitized. And the sensitization opens the door for neuroplastic pain and symptoms to start to occur. So in episode 2, part 2, we're going to go through that. So as I said, we're going to go through category 1, which again is it's not making physical sense. And you want to be like a detective here. Sherlock Holmes. you're looking
or
for...
Nancy Drew.
Oh, yes.
I just saying, she is a detective that some people may or may not know.
Who's Nancy Drew? It's so painful. I don't know.
Tanner is a bit young, if people don't know.
Yeah, many people wouldn't know this because Anne looks so young.
Oh, thank you, I think.
But she's a lot older than me.
Okay, no. Whoa. But yeah, maybe you're a bit too young for Nancy Drew.
What's our age gap?
Oh my God.
Talk about that.
Sometimes 6 years, sometimes 7. Depending on where we're at in here.
Yeah. Depending, you wanted to say that because you wouldn't want to end up with the 7.
Oh my gosh.
Sometimes it's 6.
Yeah. And actually it's a bit painful because I'll reference things and Tanner will be like, what? I'm too young for that.
Well, listen, we were both born in the 80s. It's just I was born in like the last 2 months of the 80s.
You don't count as being an 80s
I was
baby,
born
Tanner.
in 89. I was born.
I feel like that does not really count.
September 89, I was born right before it became the 90s.
Anyways, okay. Okay.
Let's dive in, Anne.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to talk about a criteria that we look for. And one of them is about symptoms originating during a stressful or emotional time. And I think probably 3/4 of the people I talk to relate to this and can identify a stressor either happening right before, during, somewhat coinciding with pain and symptoms happening. Often we don't notice this until we reflect back on it. Sometimes it's really clear. It's like this happened and then my symptoms came on, but it can commonly take a bit of reflection to see that this happened.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point because people are so physically focused that when their pain or symptoms come on, they're so focused on like, what's wrong with my body?
Yeah. That
they miss maybe all these stressors or traumas that were occurring right around that time. A question I have for you, Anne, is, what type of stressful situations have you seen triggering people's symptoms?
All sorts. And we really want to emphasize that it can be kind of positive stress, if we want to identify it that way. It can be maybe a negative stressor if we want to identify it that way, or something more difficult. It could be something really big or something really small. Sometimes it's daily stress. So that kind of daily grind, people will recognize that they've been living in maybe at the workplace or in their family life. And so it doesn't have to be this gigantic hit you over the head stressor. And so that's why it's important to really reflect on, when did my symptoms start and what was my life looking at that time?
Yeah, sometimes I feel people, to no fault of their own, probably due to upbringing, different things, I've done this, they almost invalidate that what they're going through is just a normal part of being human. So kind of, what's the big deal, right? Like a wedding, a divorce, having a baby.
Oh, yeah. Well, I want to chime in with that, with having a baby, because I relate to this. I think we can view it as, oh, yeah, that's part of life. That's normal. Or another thing that comes to mind is buying a house. That's part of life.
Yeah.
That's normal. I shouldn't be experiencing stress, but it can be very dysregulating for us.
Yeah, these changes, these life transitions, as I have shared many times on the podcast, I struggle with change.
Yeah.
My symptoms I don't think fully came on because of this. But at the time, mine and Anne's relationship was getting serious when my pain came on.
That caused Tanner lots of stress.
I was proposing.
Yes, also stress.
Happy stress, luckily for us, but good stress, but still, like, these life transitions were very dysregulating for me.
Well, and when you're going through that, Tanner, did you know at the time that you were very dysregulated? Were you able to reflect on that at the time, or was this afterwards?
I was so focused on my body and something being wrong with my body, triggering my pain, that I missed it.
Okay.
In reflection, it took, I remember reading Dr. Schumer's book, and when it came to that part, or I think it was actually Sarno's book I read first, I came to that part, it clicked instantly. I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But there was no insight beforehand.
Well, and that's an interesting point. And so it's not uncommon to get so fixated on pain or symptoms because they're very distressing, that's all we can see. Yet there's so much going on in our life that might be connected to that.
Yeah. So next criteria. Difficult emotions make it worse. So we've talked about this onset of your symptoms during a stressful or emotional time. But what a lot of people will see is their symptoms occur or worsen when feeling difficult emotions of stress. So when the nervous system is dysregulated, the brain more readily fixates on problems and generates neuroplastic pain or symptoms because it feels in danger. And I always tell people, remember, as a human being, to experience physical pain or symptoms during stressful or emotional times is really normal. Alternatively, what you see is, symptoms will reduce when you feel safe, calm, happy. This also suggests the body is structurally safe.
Yeah. And this, I think I said this before on the podcast, but this always reminds me, because I think I've had so many people I've met with say this, of I went on vacation and my symptoms went away.
Yeah.
Almost in this, what happened here? Because it can feel very confusing and almost shocking that my symptoms were gone the whole time I was enjoying myself on the beach. The moment I get back to my house, boom, the symptoms are back. And that is something commonly I hear all the time.
Or if you're like me and get stressed on holidays.
Unfortunately,
you go on
vacation, has the opposite effect.
And you get never-ending pain flares.
Yes, that can happen too. But I think more commonly the reverse happens. But that's an example of maybe when we have pressure off, when our typical daily stressors are kind of gone, when we feel a bit calmer or excitable or safer, that the symptoms reduce.
Yeah, your emotional state, whether you're regulated or dysregulated, is influencing your symptoms greatly.
Yes, and this can be really subtle. So sometimes I chat with people and they're like, I don't see that at all. And one thing, again, with the criteria, if you don't see this at all, it doesn't mean that your situation doesn't fit the criteria, like we said.
Yeah.
But it's important to kind of look for the very subtle fluctuations too, with negative or positive emotions.
Yeah. Because even if some subtle fluctuations taking place,
Mm-hmm.
without a doubt, part of your symptoms are neuroplastic.
Mm.
That's just it. If this was purely physical, like a purely physical thing, which again is rare,
Mm-hmm.
your emotional state's not going to be influencing things.
Mm-hmm.
So like I think it's an important criteria. Again, you don't have to relate to this one, but it's a pretty dead obvious one.
Totally. The next one we want to talk about is inconsistency. So that might be inconsistency in how your pain and symptoms present, inconsistency in intensity, or kind of change from day to day, or with things that might typically trigger and then all of a sudden they don't. So inconsistency in many different forms.
Yeah, and I think the reason we talk about this with people is neuroplastic pain and symptoms, they're very inconsistent in the way they present. Like I always give the example, sometimes I would go for a walk when I was in pain and my back and hip pain would be at 2 out of 10 intensity level.
Yeah.
Other times I go for a walk, it'd be an 8.
Mm.
So like I was convinced, oh, walking's triggering my symptoms, but that's a wild variation
Yes.
for a trigger to be where what you see with, physical injuries or structural problems, they're very consistent and predictable.
Yes.
Like either they're always present or whatever's triggering them triggers them to basically the same level each and every time.
Well, and so what about the people listening to this, Tanner, that do kind of not really see much fluctuations or intensity, but still maybe meet other criteria or believe it could be neuroplastic?
Yeah, and I think that's an important piece because I think sometimes people hear, oh, neuroplastic symptoms are supposed to be inconsistent.
Yeah.
I have seen people where their symptom has been very consistent for years.
Yes.
But they still related to the other criteria we're going to cover in these 2 episodes.
Yeah.
And their symptoms were still neuroplastic.
Yes. And because I think that can confuse people sometimes of like, oh, it's always very localized, it's always very consistent. And people can get really stuck there.
Yeah. So again, like we're just looking for clues. Don't go in despair mode, people, if you don't relate to a few of these criteria. I didn't relate to all of them, and that's okay. Our next criteria, spread or movement.
Yes. And again, not everyone relates to spread or movement, but this is something we commonly see as like, oh, I have symptoms like in my shoulders and they're spreading down my arms and it's spreading down my legs. And yeah.
Yeah. And well, this causes a lot of fear for people, confusion, frustration. On the bright side, it suggests your pain or symptoms are neuroplastic and treatable. And so structural pain and symptoms, it's important to understand they're typically very consistent, as we've said, and they're localized to damaged parts or problems in the body. But if your symptoms are migrating, spreading to a larger area, spreading or moving to a new area, moving up and down, becoming symmetrical, this is often how neuroplastic pain and symptoms behave. Because you have to understand, neuroplastic pain and symptoms are brain generated.
Yeah.
So it's not due to, damage in your body sending signals to your brain that there's something wrong. So what you see over time, again, not with everyone, is that it may start in a small area and then all of a sudden it's new places, like it starts to increase.
Totally, because the brain is generating it still, but just kind of generating it elsewhere, for sure. All right. The next one that we look for is multiple symptoms. And again, not everyone relates to this, but one thing we want to mention about multiple symptoms is it's not common to have multiple structurally damaged areas of the body, either at one time or kind of throughout life. So you can kind of reflect back and I'm like, oh, I have multiple pain areas now, or I've had this pain and then a year later I had a different pain and a year later I had a different injury.
Yeah, you kind of get both where some people, it's just like new areas start to pop up, accumulate, and the other, you almost get these like serial symptoms.
Yes.
Where, like you said, like, oh, my knee hurt for a while. My knee got better.
Yeah.
Now my shoulder hurts. Then my shoulder got better. Like,
yes.
So like it's important to kind of look for this. And I think one thing I'll mention here that I find is really common with people with chronic pain, chronic symptoms, myself as well, is we feel like we're the exception. So, like, I had so many areas of my body that were in pain. And my narrative around that was I'm just the most unlucky person in the world to manage to have this damaged body in all these places.
Why do you think you had that narrative, Tanner? And why do you think that's common?
Well, I didn't know about this this area of kind of mind body healing, and that pain and symptoms could be fully brain generated. Like I didn't know that, so that was the easiest solution for me to go to.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, I'm sure there's some unlucky people in the world that do have bodies that are very damaged, unfortunately, in multiple places, but it's really rare.
Yes. And I actually want to mention here, kind of similar to that thinking of the, well, what if I am the one with structural pain? What if something's missed? And that makes me think of another podcast that we talked about medical anxiety. And I talked about my experience with having preeclampsia in my pregnancies. And following that, I would constantly be like in this thinking of what if something's being missed? And I want to emphasize or empathize and validate that can be very scary and very powerful. And that's why it's always important to get things ruled out with your medical professionals and kind of have that as confirmation or validation that, okay, they are actually saying things are structurally sound or structurally safe. With multiple symptoms, we also want to say once systemic disorders have been ruled out. So again, that ruling out is an important piece of this.
Yeah, because systemic problems, diseases can present this way. And I'm always clear with people like this shouldn't be your first block or stop on the road. Like, yes, I hope people come to a brain and nervous system approach quicker than most. I think that's important, but it's really important to get things assessed and ruled out first. Okay, next. Pain or symptom triggers are not connected to the body.
And I want to highlight that often like stress or like stressful events can fall in that category as well.
So activities can become associated with pain or symptoms. These are often referred to as conditioned responses. And if you're noticing triggers that you wouldn't expect to impact you physically, and they're making your symptoms worse, this can be a sign it's neuroplastic. So some common triggers that really aren't very related to the body are things like weather, smells, sounds, foods, time of day, days of the week, stimulating environments.
Certain rooms.
I've had it with people with certain clothing where they were convinced like certain shirts were moving their shoulder out of place. Like we come up with all these reasons.
I've even had people with like certain objects in their home.
We come up with all these reasonings because that's what our brain's trying to figure out. But often what's happened is your brain's just started to label these conditions as threatening or dangerous.
Well, and then what can happen with this is every time we kind of approach these things again, then pain comes on and the brain links them together. And then we either kind of start avoiding that. Right? Or we fall into confusion of why that's happening and start going into this like rumination spiral.
Yes. And so if you're having triggers or conditions that are setting off your symptoms that are not really related to the body, it's a clear sign that this is neuroplastic.
Yes.
And the other thing that can happen is it's a little trickier to figure out, but we use it a lot in our approach. Positions or movements are also misunderstood as dangerous when they're actually safe. Like I gave the example as walking. Walking wasn't damaging my hips or back. My pain was fully neuroplastic. My brain just started to misinterpret walking equals danger. So
could that be also like sitting in a certain position?
Yes, it could be sitting. It could be certain activities. But like it's harder when it's positions or movements because we just assume, our body must be damaged. But a lot of times it's just a miscommunication that's taken place. Like now I walk, like right before this podcast, I walked for 35, 40 minutes with our dog. I can promise you, compared to 10 years ago, my spine is way worse off. I'm as older, but like I don't have pain. And so like you can break these associations, but some of these associations, especially if they're not really things connected to your your body is really great evidence to be looking for.
Totally. And we'll keep talking about that. But also, like, I think of our course, we guide people really clearly on how to do that. You have a lot of stuff on YouTube as well. So if people are looking for resources of how to do that. Another criteria that we look for is delayed onset. So that just means pain occurring after the activity or even stressful event.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is a really clear sign it can be neuroplastic. What you'll see with people is they'll do a workout, or they'll walk, or they'll do some type of physical movement, and they will feel great in the moment. They're okay in the moment. Not much symptoms. Then hours later, or the next day, all of a sudden they're getting like these bursts of symptoms taking place.
Well, and I think it can be confusing because it's like, okay, well, I did activity. Say I did a workout, I played, a game or a match with my friends. Of course, I'm going to have pain. And we're not talking about the kind of soreness that might happen when we're moving our muscles.
Totally.
Yeah.
Because soreness is normal.
Yes.
Like, if I go to the gym right now and do a bunch of different exercises I haven't done in many months, I'm going to get this delayed onset of soreness.
And you might feel stiff the next day when you wake up.
Yes. And that's typical.
Yes.
That's how our body recovers and heals. What I'm talking about is pain, not soreness, or symptoms. It could be like dizziness or fatigue or different things. Because you have to understand that if something's physically triggered and you're doing something to aggravate it, you're going to feel it right in the moment.
And that's a really great point to remember of like, if it's structural, I should be aggravating it right now.
And I had this experience every once in a while because I had so much avoidance of movements and positions by the end of my journey of pain. But every once in a while, confident Tanner would come out. And confident Tanner, he doesn't come out as often as I'd like, but confident Tanner would be like, I'm going to work out. So I go to the gym, work out for 20, 30 minutes, and it'd feel great. Be like, wow, I did it. And then like the next day, I felt like I was hit by a train. Like it was like so agonizing. And enough of those experiences happened, I just never did it again.
Yeah. And that can be really difficult because, of course, like our brain, we decide, okay, I don't want that pain experience to happen, so I'm not going to do it. And that's how our world becomes smaller and smaller. And that conditioned response becomes more and more powerful.
Next criteria, symptoms occur without an injury. So pain and symptoms can often occur with no preceding injury. I often hear people talk about, I just woke up with this new pain or symptom. It came out of nowhere. And we have to understand that often if you're experiencing physically triggered pain or symptoms, it's going to come after an injury. I'm saying injury with pain, but with like fatigue or dizziness. It could be an infection. But there is going to be some type of damaging event to bring the symptoms on. With neuroplastic symptoms, what I often see is they just come out of nowhere. For myself, like some of my symptoms were brought on by what I perceived to be an injury.
What would be an example of what a perceived injury might look like or what yours did?
Yeah, so one of the early ones I had was, I think I had my right shoulder first. And I was lifting weights. And this was a little bit delayed as I lifted weights. And then an hour later, I had this agony in my right shoulder. And I was convinced that something went wrong.
Yes.
But again, I was doing military press and felt completely fine. So it was a delay, which I didn't know at the time. But it was a perceived injury. Of or I've seen people be like, I went for a run. Something clicked. I heard a click. I didn't feel anything, but the next day, all of a sudden, my hip and leg's in pain. So, there's a perceived injury because that's what our brain does. It's trying to make predictions.
Sometimes there can, people have talked to me about maybe a slight injury, maybe something actually really was a little bit of injury, but the pain didn't make sense for that. It was way higher, way more intense, much bigger.
The other thing is that what if there was an injury?
Yes. And that's something we commonly see as well.
Because with some people we work with, there was an injury at the beginning. But when injured, pain and symptoms, they're appropriate at first. but it's really vital to understand injuries typically heal within a few weeks to a few months.
Can you say that again, Tanner? Because this is a big piece.
Injuries typically heal within a few weeks to a few months. I worked with a lady, not as a client, we both worked at a job together. She had a horrible accident where I think she fell off a wall or something, and she snapped her arm.
Fell off a wall?
Yeah, she was in a field and didn't realize there was a retaining wall,
okay.
fell, snapped the arm. It still healed.
Yes.
It healed. It took a while because that was a huge injury, but over several months, it got better. You know what I mean? So, one thing that happens, I think, with our medicalized society is we really view that, our bodies, damaged in some way all the time or flawed, but we evolved to be able to heal from injury.
Yeah.
And so what'll happen to people is, they have an injury, they get pain or physical symptoms, injury heals or infection heals, pain and symptoms continue on.
Yeah.
So it becomes neuroplastic over time.
And that's a really good thing to kind of reflect on, that if, my body should have healed, but it feels like it hasn't because it's been so long, or is my medical team saying, oh yeah, it's healed, and now we don't know why you still have pain?
Yes.
Yeah. Another one that we look for is unsuccessful physical diagnosis or treatment. So that might mean having various scans, tests, and assessments, but nothing is accurately explaining your pain or symptoms. So maybe they're coming up clear, or they're finding things, but it still doesn't quite make sense to why you're experiencing this intense pain, or maybe where you're experiencing it. Different physical treatments aren't really helpful, or maybe, so we think of this a bit as a hope or placebo, where they help a little bit, but then they stop helping.
Yeah, it doesn't permanently help. And that's a common one too, is that I often ask people is not just that, doctors or physicians can't really find something major going on to explain all your symptoms.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. It's have you tried the physical route in terms of treatments?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you tried, so many physical treatments and they're not working.
Yes.
It may mean you're trying to treat your physical body when this is actually a brain and nervous system issue.
Yeah. And it's not uncommon to go that route. Again, this is not normally people's first stop on the block. And so exploring it medically with different medical treatments and all those pieces is really common. But yeah, if you keep hitting a wall and pain and symptoms don't really get better, or they come back, that's something to think about.
Mm-hmm. We made it through, Anne.
Yes. And so this was our first part 1, talking about the criteria.
Yeah, and really, how do you know
if
your pain and symptoms are neuroplastic? So next episode that we'll release next week is going to cover category 2 of the criteria, which is sensitization factors.
Yeah.
So until next week, look for clues.
Be the detective, but don't be too good of a detective, I want to say. Don't be too intense about it.
Yeah, we want consistency, but not intensity. Consistently looking for evidence, looking how you relate to these criteria, but don't do it for 9 hours a day.
Totally. So kind of do it with this, I'm going to be curious and watch. And if we see them, we also don't have to panic. It's just more oh, I see this.
Yeah.
That confirms that there is neuroplastic or a neuroplastic component.
Yeah, the last message I'll leave with people, what we're actually going for here is curiosity. That's it. Most of us have this hyper-focused, laser-focused fear, but you can't be fearful and curious at the same time.
Yeah, I like that.
I like it, right?
Yeah, like Nancy Drew. She was curious.
You're bringing in Nancy Drew again?
I feel like she's important. Oh.
Was she curious or fearful?
She was curious.
Maybe she was a fearful detective.
No.
No? Was Nancy Drew a real person?
No, she's fiction.
I don't know.
Oh, God.
Sherlock Holmes was a real person. What, were they?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Were they not? Was it based on a real person?
I think they're all fiction. Oh, Tanner.
I don't read a lot of fiction books.
Okay, Tanner, just stop talking now. You're
So we're going to end this episode on just me failing. All right, we'll talk to y'all next week.
Talk to you next week. Thanks for listening. For more free content, check out the links for our YouTube channel, Instagram, and Facebook accounts in the episode description.
We wish you all healing.